For the last 30 nights, my girlfriend and I have been living out of our 30-year-old Toyota Land Cruiser as we travel Australia. This is the car I've been building up on this channel for the past 2 years, making it more capable off-road, but also balancing it with modern features for long-distance touring. This was camping out of the car every night, completely self-reliant, self-powered, the works. In the last month on the road, we've learned so much about living out of a four-wheel drive, we've almost become one with the car. From trackside repairs to washing our clothes, a month-long trip gives that little taste of what a lap around Australia could be like. And man, does it taste good. Our trip started straight out into the Victorian high country. Here we toured the main spots with some mates who hadn't been out that way before, so it was great to be able to show them around some of the scenic tracks, high country huts, and awesome free camping that's on offer. For anyone looking to get started in the high country, the Mount Buller area is a great place to start. You got the King River, the Howker River, a heap of huts to visit, a bunch of grouse campsites, hikes, and good day trips in your four-wheel drive. We even got to do some fishing, and I managed to catch myself my first ever trout.
I've been witnessing the first time Patrick has actually caught a fish, but don't hold your breath, that hasn't happened before. Holy f***!
Did you get the wires in it?
Patrick caught a fish!
Yeah, it feels like me and you have been fishing for like years. Trying to catch one. Very happy.
But my luck must have worn off because the 80 series lost a bolt out of its rear brake caliper,
That's the bolt we're missing.
which even with my massive bag of bolts, I didn't have anything that size. Luckily, I was able to pinch a bolt off my bull bar and space it out with some washers to get it securely mounted until I can get a new one. It definitely pays to come prepared, having a jack, spare bolts, washers, and of course the tools, because it's when you're out here doing rough tracks you're most likely to face these issues. So after travelling from Mansfield to Bright via four-wheel drive tracks doing Lake Cobbler, Abbey Yard, Buckland Valley, Anya and I continued on our own trip, heading north to the Victorian and New South Wales border to tackle one of the places I've always wanted to go. The tallest mountain range in mainland Australia, the Snowy Mountains. We took the Gee-High Walls Trail into Gee-High, and man, this place was special. Really quiet considering the time of year, and just absolutely gorgeous. Beautiful fresh river, pebble huts, flats, and those incredible mountains, including the tallest mountain in Australia, Mount Kosciuszko. After some fantastic nights in Gee-High, we began our trip up the mountain. Now, I'd never driven up here before, so it was unreal seeing this sort of landscape. We could even still see some snow up here in January. Now, it might be a bit of a recurring theme throughout this trip, but I was really keen to see all the Snowy hydro scheme. From the dams to the power stations, I dragged Anya through all of it, seeing how they generate power and divert water across the Snowies. We then began to explore what I really came up here to see, and that was the Snowy High Plains.
This is not funny.
The landscape is really historic, and it's a lot different to what we have down in our Victorian high country. Big large plains, brumbies, alpine rivers. We spent a lot of time up here, from fishing to hiking to swimming. There's a fair bit to check out. Some of the history includes the 400 million year old caves at Yarangobilly that were first discovered by stockmen in the area in the early 1800s, along with the historic thermal pool that is at a constant 27 degrees Celsius all year round. There is also the ruins of the early gold mining township of Cayandra and plenty of high country huts to explore, some as being as old as the 1860s. The walls of the Coolamine homestead were lined with newspaper, so check out some of the dates on these papers. Imagine living up here when the world was at war. I think one of my favourite places that really stood out to me was a place called Blue Waterholes. It looked like out of another world. A hike that took you across 7 or 8 water crossings through this huge ravine. The water was freezing, but it was just spectacular to see. Now, in terms of four-wheel driving in Kosciuszko, there's not heaps, nothing that's hard anyway. Being the Kosciuszko National Park, this place is managed very closely, so there's a lot of shut gates, and generally the tracks are all highly managed and in really good condition. Speaking of management, there are costs associated with having your car in the national park. So it was $17 a day to have your car in Kosciuszko, which was a bit of a shock to a Victorian like me. So I ended up getting a yearly $190 yearly park pass just so I can spend as much time up here as I wanted. But it's not just park entry fees you have to pay. Because of the pandemic, New South Wales parks now have a new booking system to control campsite numbers. So you have to book all your camping in advance, and it costs $6 every time you book a site. So it wasn't so much the cost that was annoying, it was more just hard to book a campsite last minute, especially when there's limited or no phone service up there. But I do have to say, the campgrounds are all pretty well kept, and I think it's fair to say New South Wales has some of the best drop toilets in Australia. They just don't smell like ours do. So after a week up in the mountains, we headed down towards Tumut to check out some of the huge dams and power stations that make up the Snowy Hydro scheme. It's hard to get a real sense of scale on the camera, but these pipes are massive, and the Snowy Hydro is a real engineering landmark that shaped how the landscape looks today. And that night we camped out on the man-made lake, which is Blowering Dam. After being in the high plains for quite a while, we were keen to get back to a lower altitude and the type of bush we knew, and the Brindabella National Park was just that. Located just outside of Canberra, it had low range tracks, empty campgrounds, and some of our favourite fishing and camping on the trip. This was Low Isles Flat on the Goodra Digby River, the same river system we crossed on the Blue Waterholes Walk in the Snowy Mountains. It was such a gun spot, and I was lucky enough to catch a pretty rare endangered fish as well.
Come on. Oh,
What is it? Patrick got a fish! Patrick got a fish!
I managed to catch myself a small little trout cod, which are an endangered native fish and apparently pretty rare. So we had a couple nights at this awesome camp spot before heading out across to Canberra, but on the way out we wanted to check out Mount Corrie. Unfortunately it was in the clouds, but on the way back down there was a heap of tight switchbacks, and I actually managed to destroy one of my bushings, my rear trailing arm. And I really should have checked this before I went away. They look like they've been in the car for years, so make sure you check your bushings. Luckily we were pretty close to Canberra, and I was able to buy a new bushing and get access to a vise, grease and a hammer, and I managed to get the new bushing in. Now, after this, we took it easy for a few days, camping around Canberra, checking out the sites, like this decommissioned tracking station at Honeysuckle Creek, which was actually used to receive the television transmissions of those first steps on the moon back in 1969. There's not much left here now, but some concrete and pavement, but it's a pretty special place to stay the night, knowing that this very little spot played a very important role in human history. So then we began to make our way towards the east coast of Australia, as Anya was really keen to check out Jarvis Bay. Now, a lot of you probably know trying to camp on the coast during a holiday period is hard enough, let alone trying to free camp. But we got a tip off to check out some pretty cool spots like the Beechcroft Weapons Range on Jarvis Bay that you can actually go out and camp on. You just gotta watch out for the unexploded bombs. But Jarvis Bay National Park was really beautiful. Some of the best beaches I've ever been on. The water was so clear, it was spectacular, so it's definitely worth checking out. We had a couple more days on the coast before we began to make our way back down towards Melbourne. We went via Thredbo in the mountains for a couple more nights of fishing, then we went to the Murray, and then we met up with the guys for Dan's birthday weekend out in Jamison, which was a great end to the trip. So whether you're going away for a weekend or 3 weeks, get subscribed to Aussie Arvos, because next time we're going to talk about four-wheel drive touring. From planning trips to getting the right gear and all the tips that change the way we camp, we're going to show you how to gear up for a trip and what you can do to make sure it's an awesome experience, because we are so bloody lucky to get to tour this beautiful country.